Before we dive into this whirlwind of betrayal and comeback, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a like. Your support powers the other toast and keeps these true story-inspired dramas coming every week. Now, let's begin our story, a tale that proves sometimes the quietest people carry the sharpest knives. San Francisco, springtime. Tech Week fever pulsed through the city, electric with billion-dollar dreams, rooftop parties, and whispers of the next unicorn. I was Elena Ross, age 32, co-founder of Pay, the hottest fintech startup on the block. I had everything people in this city worship: the corner office, the penthouse with a view of the bay, and the world's most admired tech lawyer as my fiancé. Matthew Lark was the man whose smile could sway judges and whose Instagram made strangers swoon. My best friend Izzy, short for Isabella Cohen, was the numbers genius every venture capitalist wanted but only I could call family. For 10 years, Izzy and I had been inseparable, a two-woman army against Silicon Valley's boys' club. Together, we built Pay from dorm room code to IPO-ready giant. But on a Tuesday night in March, as the city glittered below, I learned that glass, no matter how thick, could crack in an instant. It started so small, so stupid, you almost have to laugh. My phone buzzed with a Venmo notification. Matt paid Izzy for last night. A sly emoji winked from the screen. My breath caught. My mind tried to dismiss it. Surely, a joke between friends. Except Matt had told me he was working late, pulling an all-nighter on an acquisition. Izzy had texted from her parents' house in Oakland, saying she was out of town. The old Elena, the hopeful one, wanted to believe in coincidence. The new Elena, sharpened by a decade of startup wars, took a screenshot and slid into silence. I lay in bed that night beside Matt, his breathing deep and peaceful. Outside, the fog rolled in, swallowing the city lights. Inside, my mind raced. I replayed the last month: late meetings, inside jokes, Izzy's sudden bursts of nervous laughter, Matt's new cologne that lingered in the guest bathroom. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to demand answers. But I didn't. I remembered what my mother once told me in Portuguese: when a snake shows its tongue, don't grab it. Watch where it goes. That was the night I stopped being the dreamer. That was the night I became the observer. Over the next week, I slipped into a role I had never played, the ghost in my own life. I watched, cataloged, collected. Matt and Izzy were good, too good. But you don't build a company like Pay without learning how to spot patterns, how to read code for bugs. At a launch party, I noticed Matt's hand brush Izzy's lower back, subtle and quick. At a team dinner, she laughed a little too loud at his joke. At work, Matt sent an encrypted email to an address I didn't recognize, but I caught the preview on his laptop. Room 1906. Same time. My stomach twisted. Was it all in my head, or had I been so busy building an empire that I missed the collapse of my own world? Instead of confrontation, I turned to calculation. My co-founder's paranoia had always led her to keep meticulous records, and Matt, the lawyer, was obsessed with covering his tracks. I knew if there was more to their secrets, the truth was somewhere in the data. Quietly, I enabled device backups on Matt's phone, setting them to mirror on my iPad. I combed through shared documents, searching for traces, receipts, calendar events, hotel bookings. I found a booking under Matt's company credit card at the Palace Hotel. 2 guests, 1 night, champagne for 2. Still, I needed more. I needed the kind of proof that would stand up to the cold scrutiny of betrayal. That's when I remembered Victor Santos. Victor had once been an FBI cyber investigator before selling his skills to the highest bidder. I'd met him at a cybersecurity conference years ago, we traded favors, and he owed me one. I called him, voice steady, heart pounding. I need surveillance. Discreet, digital, physical, whatever it takes. Victor didn't ask questions. Text me the names, he said, and I'll get you answers. Days blurred into nights. I threw myself into work, driving the IPO prep, fielding questions from bankers, pretending I still lived in the fairy tale everyone envied. Inside, I was cracking. Every meeting with Izzy was a test of will. Every dinner with Matt was a lesson in acting. The hardest part wasn't the lie, it was the memory of trust. Trust, that most expensive currency, now worth less than nothing. One Thursday, Victor called me. His voice was low, urgent. You need to see this, Elena. They're not just cheating on you. They're robbing you. My hands shook as I drove to his office in a nondescript building on the Embarcadero. He handed me a folder, thick with photos, printouts, and USB drives. I flipped through images of Matt and Izzy at dinners, hotel lobbies, always looking over their shoulders. Then, the spreadsheets, transfers from company accounts, a Shell LLC registered in Delaware, emails discussing trades based on confidential acquisition info. It was bigger than betrayal. It was criminal. In that moment, pain burned away to something sharper. I realized Matt and Izzy hadn't just betrayed me, they had weaponized my trust, my work, my name. They thought I was just another founder too blinded by love to see the con. They thought I would fold quietly, maybe sell my shares and leave, too heartbroken to fight. They were wrong. That night, alone in my apartment, I mapped out everything I had learned. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of my old life, and the first brick in my new one. The hook was in. The only question now was how deep I wanted to drive it. I watched the sun rise over the bay, the city bathed in gold. I had a plan. It would be slow, careful, devastating. No rage, no drama, just the quiet, methodical unmaking of two people who thought they were untouchable. The next time Matt and Izzy saw me, they wouldn't see the heartbroken woman they expected. They'd see the architect of their downfall. This was just the beginning. Remember to like, subscribe, and stay with us, because what happens next will shock you. The city never really sleeps, and neither did I, not now, not with every secret illuminated by the blue glow of my screens. By morning, my mind pulsed with strategies and timelines. I watched Matt in the kitchen, slicing fruit for his green smoothie, humming off-key like nothing was wrong. Izzy texted cheerful memes to our company group chat. The world around me moved as if nothing had cracked, but I saw fractures everywhere. With Victor's folder locked in my desk, I became a chess player, planning 10 moves ahead. The first rule, never tip your hand. So, I wore my usual mask. I showed up early, charmed the bankers, smiled for the cameras. Izzy and I reviewed financial projections side by side. She explained quarterly burn rates, never breaking eye contact, her voice steady, confident. If she sensed anything, she hit it perfectly. But paranoia is contagious. I watched for any sign they suspected me, nervous glances, half-finished texts, sudden schedule changes. Izzy grew more cautious, guarding her phone. Matt installed a new password manager. The tighter their secrets, the tighter I drew my net. Victor's next update was a revelation. They're preparing to move more money, he said, showing me logs of late-night wire transfers. And Elena, they're using your name on one of the shell companies. Rage flared, then settled into a cold resolve. My company, my identity, used as camouflage for their fraud. But every move they made left a trail, and Victor was relentless. We mirrored their cloud storage, capturing documents before they could delete them. I even found a voice memo, Matt coaching Izzy on answers for our board, his tone patient, patronizing. Elena will never know, she trusts you too much, he said. The betrayal pressed against my ribs like a bruise. Meanwhile, the IPO buzz grew louder. Journalists clamored for interviews. Matt basked in the attention, his charm lighting up every panel discussion. Izzy handled investor calls with the poise of a star CFO. I played my role to perfection, Elena, the visionary leader, cool under pressure, her team a model of trust and unity. The pressure mounted when our lead investor, Raj Patel, called me in for breakfast at the Fairmont. He was a straight talker, a veteran of too many Silicon Valley flameouts. "You're on the edge of a miracle or a meltdown, Elena," he warned over strong coffee. "If there's anything I should know, now's the time." I smiled and steered the conversation back to growth metrics. But Raj's words stuck with me. In the Valley, secrets are always the prelude to scandal. At home, I rehearsed every word, every gesture. I started collecting innocuous details, Matt's travel receipts, Izzy's private Slack channels, encrypted emails that bounced between them at odd hours. Jessie Tran, Izzy's executive assistant, became my unintentional informant. She was overlooked, ignored by Izzy except for the most menial tasks. But Jessie saw everything. One evening, she caught me in the elevator. "You working late too, Elena?" she asked, shy but sharp-eyed. I nodded, and she offered a wry smile. "Izzy's not as careful as she thinks." I waited, letting Jessie's words hang in the air. Days later, she slid a flash drive across my desk, wrapped in a sticky note. "You should see this," she said, almost a whisper. That night, I found it held months of emails, hotel bookings, crypto wallet transfers, even a deleted draft labeled Plan B, post-IPO. My heart thudded. Jessie, it turned out, was the silent witness to all the secrets my best friend tried to hide. The evidence was overwhelming. Matt and Izzy were siphoning funds from our pre-IPO war chest, hiding them in offshore accounts. They were tipping competitors about our deals, even front-running investments with their secret Delaware LLC. They planned to disappear right after the IPO, leaving me to pick up the pieces. They had even drafted an exit statement, blaming me for any chaos. But the more I learned, the less I burned with anger. I felt detached, almost scientific, as if I were studying some rare disease. I plotted my next moves with surgical precision. The company's bylaws, written by Matt himself, contained a morality and fiduciary trust clause, buried deep but ironclad. Anyone caught betraying the company or co-founders would forfeit all rights, shares, and assets. Matt's own legal paranoia turned against him. Every night, I added to my arsenal, screenshots, server logs, bank statements, voice memos, and Jessie's email cache. I built 3 dossiers, one for the board, one for the authorities, and one for the press. Victor cross-checked every detail, ensuring not even a typo could unravel my case. Jessie quietly joined my inner circle, loyal not out of ambition but justice. I kept up appearances. Team dinners, investor calls, late-night strategy sessions. Izzy joked about post-IPO vacations in Paris. Matt talked of wedding venues and guest lists. All the while, I counted the days until I would make my move. As April ended, our IPO gala loomed. The city's elite would gather on the rooftop of the Transbay Tower, with the eyes of the financial world on us. Matt was scheduled to give the keynote. Izzy would unveil the next-gen product. I would smile for the cameras and hold their futures in my hands. Every detail was timed, every outcome mapped. But I knew the hardest part was yet to come. Betrayal wasn't a clean wound. It bled into everything, work, memories, identity. I stood on the edge of my old life, ready to burn the bridge behind me. In the quiet before dawn, I looked out over the city and felt something new, not fear, not heartbreak, but power. Soon, the world would see the truth. I would not only survive this. I would become the force that changed everything. The pieces were in place. The next move would change all our lives forever. Remember, if you have not subscribed, now is the time. The real game is just beginning, and you will not want to miss a single moment. The week before the IPO gala, San Francisco shimmered with anticipation. Billboards flashed Orimpay's gold logo over Market Street, and the business press speculated breathlessly about our public debut. On the surface, our team was united and unstoppable. Underneath, I was laying the kind of trap you only set once in a lifetime. I started with the board. Our directors prided themselves on due diligence, but most preferred the comfort of plausible deniability. They trusted me and Matt to steer the ship, and Izzy's reputation as a financial wizard only reinforced that trust. I scheduled a series of private meetings with select board members, always under the pretense of discussing investor relations or market positioning. With each, I dropped subtle hints, concerns about irregularities, a need for transparency, the importance of founder integrity ahead of the IPO. They listened politely, promising to keep an eye out. None realized how close their empire was to collapse. At the same time, I worked with Victor to ensure that every shred of evidence would be admissible, verifiable, and impossible to dismiss. He taught me the finer points of chain of custody, digital forensics, and secure transmission. We created 3 sealed packets, one for the SEC, one for the local authorities, and one for an investigative journalist known for exposing tech scandals. Jesse, ever the silent sentinel, helped with logistics, keeping copies in off-site encrypted drives. I left nothing to chance. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about making sure justice could not be denied or buried by powerful lawyers. Meanwhile, I played the part of the soon-to-be bride. Matt became more affectionate, perhaps sensing my distance, perhaps trying to keep his own secrets hidden. He planned a surprise engagement dinner with our closest friends, complete with a rooftop serenade and a photographer to capture every moment for social media. Izzy gushed about the future, dropping hints about a partnership with a major Asian bank. Her act was flawless. Anyone watching would have envied our friendship, our trust, our apparent happiness. They would never suspect that our smiles were painted on with the precision of warriors readying for battle. But under the laughter and champagne toasts, tension simmered. Raj Patel, our sharp-eyed lead investor, began digging. After my subtle warnings, he quietly pulled recent transaction logs and raised questions about delayed transfers. I feigned concern, suggesting a third-party audit, which Matt and Izzy quickly shut down. Their reaction only fueled Raj's suspicion. I watched the cracks widen, knowing the avalanche was coming. One evening, I invited Jesse to my penthouse under the guise of prepping investor packages. We sat by the window overlooking the bay, files spread between us. She paused over an encrypted email chain. "Do you think they ever loved you, Elena? Or was it always about control?" I hesitated. Jesse's question cut deeper than she knew. "I think they loved what I could give them. Not who I am," I said finally. Jessie nodded, understanding more than she let on. That night, as she left, she turned and said, "Whatever happens, you're not alone in this." Her quiet solidarity strengthened my resolve. Victor checked in daily. "Timing is everything," he reminded me. "You have one shot. Make sure when the trap snaps, it closes on both of them at once." We mapped every step, when to send the files, when to tip off the press, when to involve the board and authorities. We rehearsed scenarios. What if Matt got suspicious? What if Izzy tried to run? What if the board tried to hush it all up? For every contingency, I had a countermove. My heart pounded each time Matt or Izzy entered my office, but my mask never slipped. Then, 2 days before the gala, Matt received a call from an unknown number. I watched his face tighten as he listened, then turned to stone when he saw me watching. "Work stuff," he said, too quickly, tucking his phone away. Izzy grew withdrawn, snapping at Jesse over trivial details. That night, Victor called with an update. "They know something's wrong. Matt tried to transfer more money out, bank flagged it and froze the account. I nodded, knowing the window was closing. It was now or never. The next morning, I met Raj Patel again, this time in his private office. I handed him an encrypted tablet. "You asked for transparency. Here it is." Raj read in silence, his eyes widening as he scrolled through transaction logs, email threads, and surveillance images. He looked up, stunned. "This is massive. If this leaks, it won't just be your company, it'll rock the whole sector." I met his gaze, steady and unblinking. "I need your help to make sure the truth comes out. No more secrets." By evening, the plan was in motion. Victor delivered the sealed packets to their destinations, time-stamped for simultaneous release. Jesse confirmed our board's emergency session. The journalist agreed to hold the story until my signal, guaranteeing maximum impact. I scheduled my own exit statement to go live at the height of the gala, ready to control the narrative as the world watched. That night, as the city's lights twinkled below, I stood alone on my balcony, breathless with anticipation and dread. I wondered if the old Elena, the idealist, the dreamer, would have hesitated, clinging to hope that love or friendship might survive. But that Elena was gone, replaced by someone forged in the furnace of betrayal. The next day would change everything. The glass that had cracked would finally shatter, and from its ruins, would build something unbreakable. For everyone still watching, don't forget to subscribe. The most explosive chapter is about to begin, and trust me, you have never seen revenge done like this. On the day of the IPO gala, the city felt charged, as if every light was watching. The rooftop of the Transbay Tower was transformed into a spectacle of gold and glass, with sweeping views of San Francisco and enough flowers to make even the jaded VCs pause for a photo. The guest list read like a who's who of Silicon Valley. Investors, founders, journalists, and politicians mingled under chandeliers, champagne glasses flashing as deals were whispered in corners. The air buzzed with anticipation, everyone waiting for Orimpay's big reveal. A new era, they said, a testament to innovation and trust. I arrived just before sunset, wrapped in a dress chosen not for romance but for power, deep sapphire, sleek and sharp. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling, my heart a drumbeat in my chest. Matt greeted me with his practiced warmth, the world's most supportive fiancé, snapping a selfie for our followers. Izzy played the perfect partner, laughing easily with journalists, her eyes never leaving the horizon. To anyone else, we were a Silicon Valley fairy tale. Only Jesse, silent in the background, saw the tightness in my jaw and the calculation in my gaze. As the city slipped from gold into violet dusk, I took my place at the head table. Victor texted from across the room, 3 words, all clocks synced. That was our code. The evidence packets were timed, the press alert scheduled, the board's emergency meeting locked in for the precise moment Matt would stand at the podium. Every digital fuse was set to burn together. The world would see the truth in real time, no chance for a cover-up. The program unfolded with choreographed precision. There was a short film about our journey from scrappy founders to market leaders. Applause. A tribute to Matt, highlighting his legal brilliance. More applause. The board chair's glowing remarks about Izzy's financial genius. Laughter and raised glasses. Then it was my turn to speak. I looked at the sea of faces, so certain they knew our story. I thanked my team, my co-founders, and the investors who believed in the dream. I even thanked Matt and Izzy by name, my voice steady, the words ringing with layers only a few would ever understand. Behind my smile, I felt every eye on me, every camera ready to record not just my words but what would come next. Matt's keynote was next. He stood, his expression flawless, his confidence unshaken. As he launched into his speech, "Tonight, we stand on the edge of history, united by vision and trust," I saw Izzy's hands tremble as she reached for her glass. Jessie hovered at the edge of the room, ready for my signal. The wind picked up, carrying the city's electric scent across the rooftop. At exactly 8:17 p.m., Victor sent the final confirmation: "It's time." In the space of one breath, everything began to unravel. My phone buzzed as the first press notifications hit. Screens in the ballroom flashed with alerts: breaking, massive fraud allegations at Orampay IPO. Journalists' phones lit up. Board members glanced down, faces paling. Matt faltered on stage as whispers spread. Izzy's jaw clenched, her mask slipping for just a second. I watched the realization dawn, slow and terrible, as our guests realized they were not at a celebration, but a reckoning. Raj Patel, seated near the front, stood up, signaling security. He turned to the board chair, his voice carrying. "We need an emergency session now." The board members filed out in tense silence, clutching their phones, the weight of their oversight now a spotlight burning overhead. Jessie guided them to a private room, her role now clear. Victor moved to intercept Matt as he left the stage, a plainclothes officer by his side. Izzy stood frozen, eyes darting for exits. She tried to leave, but two SEC agents blocked her path. I remained in my seat, surrounded by a storm of confusion and questions. Reporters rushed toward me, cameras rolling. I recited the statement I had prepared: "Orampay holds itself to the highest standards. I am shocked and devastated by these allegations. We are cooperating fully with the authorities and will ensure every stakeholder is protected." My voice did not waver. This moment had been rehearsed 100 times in the darkness of sleepless nights. In the private boardroom, the true drama unfolded. The evidence was undeniable: transfers, emails, shell companies, insider trades. Matt tried to argue, his voice breaking, but the board was stone. Izzy, faced with her own signature on documents, went silent. Victor presented the timeline: every step, every deception. The SEC officials took statements, their questions sharp and relentless. Jessie handed over the files, her presence steady and professional, no longer the overlooked assistant but the key to justice. Outside, the party collapsed into chaos. Investors demanded answers, guests hurried for the elevators, journalists huddled around laptops typing furious updates. The world watched live as Orampay's fairy tale shattered, piece by piece, in the glare of public scrutiny. I sat alone at the edge of the rooftop, the city stretching out before me, my heart both heavy and strangely light. I had lost everything I thought I wanted, but in that moment, I realized I had become someone new, someone unbreakable. As the night deepened, the authorities led Matt and Izzy away in handcuffs. Flashes popped. The crowd parted. The same hands that once applauded now covered shocked mouths. I stood, smoothing my dress, and walked back into the ballroom, not as the betrayed founder, but as the architect of justice. Victor nodded as I passed. Jessie met my eyes and smiled. For those who have followed this story, don't blink. What comes after the fall is sometimes more powerful than the fall itself. Make sure to subscribe and stay with us, because the rise from these ashes will be unlike anything you have ever seen. The world woke up to chaos. Headlines screamed across every news site and social feed: Silicon Valley power couple arrested at IPO gala, Orampay scandal shakes tech market, insider betrayal unveiled by founding CEO. Overnight, what should have been a coronation became a global cautionary tale. The city's morning fog was thicker than usual, or maybe it was just the haze of shock that hung over everything as I walked into the Orampay offices for the first time as the only founder left standing. Every television in the lobby blared coverage of the previous night. Video clips played on loop: Matt, eyes wide and pleading, being led away in handcuffs, Izzy staring at the floor, flanked by agents, my own face, calm but unyielding, delivering the official statement. Employees whispered in corners, clutching their phones, eyes darting as I passed. Some offered hesitant smiles, Others looked away, unsure where loyalty now belonged. The IPO was, of course, postponed indefinitely. Banks froze disputed accounts. Lawyers flooded my inbox with urgent messages, while reporters gathered outside, hoping for a glimpse of the woman who'd orchestrated the unmasking. The board's emergency session lasted through sunrise. Raj Patel opened with a voice harder than steel. "This is not just a scandal. This is a test of our integrity." He demanded resignations from anyone remotely complicit or negligent. The remaining directors scrambled to distance themselves, each trying to prove their hands were clean. Victor and Jesse presented their final timeline, connecting every wire transfer, every secret meeting, every cryptic email. I stayed silent until it was time to address the room. "The company will survive if we lead with truth," I said. "There is no path forward built on lies. Not anymore." For the first time, no one interrupted or second-guessed me. In the following days, the dominoes fell fast. The SEC froze not only Izzy's and Matt's assets but also those of their shell corporations. The authorities raided apartments and storage units, uncovering more evidence of conspiracy and fraud. Journalists uncovered even older schemes, deals Matt had orchestrated in other companies, deals Izzy had quietly hedged for personal gain. Other tech firms, fearing their own secrets exposed, purged their ranks, launching hurried audits and whispering Elena's name as both warning and legend. Jesse, suddenly a hero, handled the internal communications, making sure staff knew their work was valued, their futures not yet destroyed. She moved through the office with new confidence, her loyalty unshakable now that the truth had power. Victor remained in the background, always watching, ensuring that nothing could be spun or silenced. When employees gathered in the common area to watch my address on TV, I stood in the CEO's glass-walled office, looking out at the city I loved and the battlefield I had survived. Yet, the cost was steep. Friends vanished. Invitations dried up. Some investors threatened lawsuits, convinced they could recoup losses by blaming the last founder standing. My inbox was a graveyard of partnerships abruptly ended. And always, the ache. How many moments of real friendship, of real love, had been tainted by deceit? The pain was sharp, but it clarified everything. There would be no return to the woman I had been. Within a week, the company was a different place. Walls echoed with silence instead of laughter. The IPO bankers met with me, faces drawn, asking if I intended to stay. I answered without hesitation, "If you want a company led by truth, I'm your CEO. If you want comfort, you'll have to look elsewhere." Some left. Most stayed, driven not just by loyalty but by the desire to see what a company built on exposure and honesty could become. News crews camped outside my building. Protesters appeared with handmade signs, some blaming me for the scandal, others hailing me as a crusader for justice. I ignored them all, pouring my focus into restructuring. Every contract was reviewed, every vendor vetted. I brought in external auditors with no ties to our history. I promoted Jessie to chief of staff and gave her the authority to act in my name. Victor's security team locked down every digital system. Raj Patel, once a skeptic, became my staunchest ally, providing the political cover I needed to clear out anyone connected to the fraud. And then, in the middle of this storm, came the letters, from Matt, from Izzy, both delivered from their respective jail cells. Matt's was 10 pages of apologies, excuses, and veiled threats, insisting he'd been trapped, blaming the system, even blaming me for being too ambitious. Izzy's was shorter, raw and desperate, begging forgiveness, claiming she'd been manipulated, that she never meant to hurt me. I read each only once. I set them aside, their words already echoes from another life. As the first week ended, the board convened once more. Reporters watched from across the street, pressing their faces to the glass. I stood at the head of the table, hands steady, voice clear. "We have a chance to do something no one in this city has done," rebuild not from profit, but from principle. The choice is yours. The vote was unanimous. For the first time, Warumpe was truly mine. That night, I stood on my balcony, alone above a city that now whispered my name with awe and suspicion. The ashes of my old life drifted on the wind, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a reminder that justice, once awakened, does not sleep. I was not finished. I was just beginning. Stay close and subscribe, because the most shocking turns are still to come. Sometimes, the aftershocks of betrayal carry more power than the original quake. A month passed, and San Francisco's gossip cycle spun from outrage to fascination. Warumpe Reborn read the headlines now, as if the city itself was uncertain whether to mourn a lost fairy tale or root for my improbable resurgence. The company's IPO was frozen, but our user numbers climbed, driven by the very scandal that nearly destroyed us. Journalists requested interviews, eager to hear the story from my lips, to probe the enigma of the woman who had dismantled her own kingdom and survived. I refused most requests, preferring to let actions speak. But behind closed doors, I began crafting my next move, not for vengeance, but for something more dangerous, redemption built on public reckoning. I started by meeting with the regulators. The SEC, the State Attorney General, even the IRS. I provided every document, every log, every timeline. We're not here to protect the legacy, I told them. We're here to rebuild trust in a system that has forgotten what that means. My transparency bought goodwill, and, unexpectedly, a kind of respect. You could have run, one investigator admitted. Most do. I just smiled, knowing my power now came not from secrets, but from the truth I had dragged into daylight. Inside Warumpe, I enforced a new era. Jesse's promotion to Chief of Staff sent a signal: loyalty and integrity, not titles or old alliances, would shape our future. We held company-wide meetings, open forums where every employee could question leadership, review decisions, and propose new safeguards. I asked Victor to train our engineering teams in digital hygiene and forensics, turning our greatest wound into our greatest strength. We're going to be the company no one can fool, I told them. Not because we're paranoid, but because we know the cost of trust lost. Raj Patel arranged meetings with other CEOs rocked by their own scandals. They wanted to know my process, my thinking, my resolve. Some came out of fear, others out of curiosity. I told them the same thing: you cannot fix what you will not face. Start with the truth. Then build new systems so no one can hide in the shadows again. A few were offended, but most left sobered, their arrogance shaken. The board, once a rubber stamp, now scrutinized every action with a new vigilance. Jesse's team built a digital whistleblower platform, and within days, new red flags appeared. We acted on each one, no matter how small. Rumors spread: Warumpe would not just survive, but become the watchdog for an entire industry. Still, not all wounds healed quickly. Old friends cut me off, blaming me for the collapse of social circles and lucrative deals. Others, emboldened by my example, reached out in secret, confessing their own betrayals and asking for advice. I realized how many in this city walked on eggshells, always fearing the next scandal. It struck me that my story was no longer just about Matt and Izzy. It had become a parable for anyone who had ever trusted the wrong person, ever lost everything, ever needed to build again from ruin. One afternoon, as spring turned to summer, a letter arrived, this time not from Matt or Izzy, but from the prison warden. Matt had tried to orchestrate a media campaign from inside, blaming me, calling himself a victim. I sent the evidence I had gathered to the right authorities, watching as the last embers of his reputation turned to ash. Izzy, meanwhile, took a plea deal, agreeing to testify in exchange for reduced time. Her testimony was damning. She revealed layers of conspiracy Matt had hidden even from her. The press painted her as both villain and pawn, a tragic figure undone by ambition. Through all this, Victor remained a shadow, guiding, protecting. "You've made enemies," he warned. "Don't think this is over." But I felt only resolve. Each night, I returned to my penthouse, watching the city below, my reflection now a stranger with iron in her eyes. I began drafting a manifesto, a blueprint for ethical leadership, for rebuilding trust from the ground up. I wanted the next generation to know, you can be broken and still rise. You can lose everything and still choose not to become the thing that destroyed you. At the first all-hands meeting after the scandal, I stood before hundreds of faces, some loyal, some wary, some simply curious. I spoke plainly. We have seen what happens when greed goes unchecked, when secrets fester, when power becomes a game. That era is over. Our future will be built on a new kind of strength, the courage to speak truth, even when it hurts. For a moment, silence. Then, a single applause, growing until the entire room stood with me. The reckoning was not the end. It was the beginning. I was no longer just Elena Ross, betrayed founder. I was the architect of something bigger, a culture built not on fear, but on vigilance and honesty. In that moment, I felt every scar, every betrayal, every sleepless night transform into the foundation of a legacy no one could take away. If you have followed this story, remember to subscribe. The journey from ruin to reckoning is just the start. What comes next will redefine everything you believe about justice, power, and survival. In the months that followed, I discovered the true price of exposing corruption. The city hailed me as a whistleblower, but some corners whispered a different story. Rivals painted me as ruthless, investors questioned whether one person could rebuild a brand battered by so much scandal. Every headline, every interview, every new hire carried an undercurrent of suspicion. I had survived betrayal and engineered a reckoning, but I was not naive enough to believe the world would now greet me with open arms. The company's wounds were slow to heal. Half our partners abandoned ship, unwilling to weather the turbulence of reinvention. The IPO remained frozen, banks demanded more audits, and the staff that stayed did so warily, unsure whether they were heroes, victims, or pawns in a story much larger than themselves. Each morning, I walked the glass corridors and felt the weight of 1,000 judgments pressing in. Jesse shielded me from the worst rumors, but I caught fragments, whispers about whether the new Elena was just as dangerous as the old regime. Sometimes, the price of truth is loneliness. Raj Patel helped me manage the board, his reputation giving us space to rebuild. But even he warned me. You have made enemies, Elena. Some will never forgive you for breaking the game they thought they'd always win. I accepted this. The scars I carried were now armor. When my name was dragged through mud by anonymous accounts, I posted receipts, timelines, facts. I responded to every question with transparency and proof. My public face was steel, but in private, doubt gnawed at the edges. I wondered whether there would ever be a day I could simply trust again. Amid the chaos, Jessie flourished. She created an internal alliance of staff who believed in the new vision. Together, we drafted the Orempay Code, guidelines for transparency, reporting, and ethical decision-making, posted for all to see. We opened company town halls and allowed anonymous questions, no matter how brutal. Some employees confessed their own minor lapses, relieved to be freed from secrets. Others left, unable or unwilling to adapt. What remained was smaller, rawer, but forged by fire. Regulators pressed on with their investigations. Izzy's testimony at trial made headlines. She laid bare the backroom deals, the offshore accounts, the cold calculations. Matt, for his part, denied everything, claiming he had been framed. The courtroom became a theater, the city watching as the details of our lives were dissected. I was called to the stand, my calm face hiding memories that threatened to unspool. Under oath, I told the truth. I did not embellish or seek pity. I trusted them, I said. When I discovered the fraud, I acted. My words echoed in the silence, the judge's gaze steady and unblinking. After the verdict, guilty on all counts, the city's mood shifted. The press praised my courage. Investors quietly returned, sending offers to fund a company built on the ruins of betrayal. I declined most. I would not sell my legacy to those who had looked away during the worst. Jessie received a promotion, her role now official and protected. Raj joined our board permanently, his presence a shield against old enemies. Yet, even in victory, the wounds lingered. Some nights, I woke to the memory of Matt's voice, the betrayal in Izzy's eyes, the way trust had once felt like air, natural and necessary. Now, every partnership, every handshake, was a negotiation. My world was smaller, but truer. I spent evenings on my balcony, the city's lights distant and cold, and wrote the next chapters of the Orompe Manifesto. Not a victory lap, but a warning and a promise. A new reputation began to grow, one of ruthless integrity. Smaller companies reached out, asking for audits, ethics training, help uncovering their own dark corners. I accepted every case, sending teams to tear down the walls behind which power hid. The same tools that had revealed my betrayal became weapons for others seeking justice. For every enemy, I made an ally. For every threat, a plan. In one final twist, I learned that Matt had tried to contact me from prison, sending a letter through a mutual acquaintance. It was a plea for forgiveness, for understanding, for any scrap of the life we once shared. I did not read it. I tossed it, unopened, into the fire that burned on my balcony. I knew now, forgiveness is not owed, and some debts are paid only in truth. If you are still with me, hit subscribe, because the final cost, and reward, of exposing the truth is still to come. In the next chapter, the world will learn what it really means to build a legacy on ashes and promises. Autumn in San Francisco was sharper that year. Brisk winds sweeping through glass towers, sunlight bouncing off cranes and scaffoldings, the city in a state of endless construction and renewal. Orompe, too, was rebuilding. We had survived the fire, but every day brought new tests. Former competitors circled, looking for weakness. Board members, old and new, demanded more than results. They demanded proof that this company, forged in scandal, could become a standard-bearer for a cleaner, more honest future. My days blurred into strategy sessions, regulatory meetings, and investor calls. Every quarter, Jessie and I published public audits, making all transactions transparent. When a glitch triggered panic on social media, we live-streamed a town hall, answered questions in real time, and released the root cause analysis within hours. The trust we built was not the blind devotion of the past but an earned, hard-won belief, one crisis at a time. Employees who stayed were tested daily. Some quit, unable to live under constant scrutiny, but those who remained became the backbone of a new culture. Jessie led a team that taught digital hygiene to startups across the Bay, while Raj expanded our ethics programs nationwide. Requests poured in. A fintech in Seattle suspected a quiet embezzlement. Could we help? An online bank in Miami wanted to audit its own founders. We answered every call, knowing that our willingness to confront darkness was now our greatest asset. Soon, headlines changed. Orompe sets new standard. Founder becomes tech's watchdog. Sometimes, it felt surreal. My inbox, once full of threats and blame, now filled with thanks. Still, not everyone was ready for the new order. At a banking summit in Los Angeles, I was ambushed by a rival CEO, an old friend of Matt's, who accused me of betraying my own. I met his stare and replied, "If protecting criminals is loyalty, then I hope to be a traitor every day of my life." His smile faltered, and the room, full of people who had watched my story unfold, grew quiet. I had learned that the most powerful weapon in a world built on secrets was simple, relentless honesty. At home, the past lingered. Sometimes I caught myself staring at the horizon, remembering the girl who once believed in forever. That girl was gone, replaced by someone whose every instinct had been tested and sharpened. Jesse urged me to rest, to let the company run itself for a while, but I could not. The fear that darkness would return never fully left me. In the rare moments I found solitude, I read letters from people whose lives were changed by the scandal, entrepreneurs who caught fraud before it ruined them, young women who saw in me the proof that power and integrity could coexist. Raj suggested we launch the Aurum Foundation, a non-profit to teach ethical leadership, sponsor whistleblower protections, and fund tech forensics. The legacy you're building can't just be for us, he said. It has to be for everyone who comes after. I agreed. We hosted our first summit that November, filling a San Francisco ballroom with founders, regulators, and survivors of corporate betrayal. Jessie opened the event, her story of once being overlooked drawing a standing ovation. When I spoke, I laid out our core truth: trust is not a default, it is a discipline. We must be as vigilant in peace as we are in crisis. The foundation quickly became a force, attracting allies and rattling old enemies. Matt's name was now a cautionary tale, Izzy's testimony used in university ethics courses. Their downfall had become the catalyst for a generation of changemakers, and though it brought no pleasure, it brought purpose. In rare quiet moments, I allowed myself a measure of pride, not for the destruction, but for the rebuilding. One cold night, a letter arrived addressed to me, handwritten with no return address. Inside, a single sentence: "Thank you for not letting him win." There was no signature, but I knew. For all the scars left by betrayal, there was also gratitude in the shadows, lives changed, cycles broken, truths set free. The story of Aurum was no longer just mine. It was the city's, the industry's, a beacon for anyone determined to break the cycle of silence and secrecy. My name, once whispered as a victim, was now spoken with respect, or at least, with caution. And every time I faced a new test, every time the old doubts threatened, I remembered, the legacy I fought for was bigger than revenge. It was about showing the world what could rise from the ashes when someone finally chose the truth. This is far from over. Subscribe and stay with us. The most powerful lessons, and the highest risks, still wait ahead. Winter arrived with a sharpness that matched my resolve. The city's skyline, once a backdrop for scandal, now bore witness to transformation. Each morning, I crossed the plaza beneath Aurumpay's new headquarters, feeling the eyes of those who had doubted, envied, or admired my journey. It was not pride that lifted my chin, but the knowledge that surviving betrayal had forged me into someone unrecognizable, even to myself. The foundation we had built on hard truths was finally beginning to show results. Requests for help surged. The Aurum Foundation's hotline became a lifeline for whistleblowers, small businesses, and tech workers facing impossible choices. We created protocols for anonymous disclosures, legal support, and even safe houses for those at risk of retaliation. Jessie, whose confidence had become legend within the company, led the expansion of our training programs to universities and startups around the country. She had transformed from the silent assistant into a symbol of second chances, proof that loyalty and courage could change a company's destiny. Not every story ended in justice. Sometimes, the truth was buried by more powerful interests. Sometimes, those we tried to help found themselves ostracized or quietly fired, their names blacklisted. Each time, I took those failures personally. Jessie would remind me, "You can't win every battle, but you change the war." I held on to that, knowing the fight for a better industry would never be clean or complete. Every victory we achieved was paid for in scars and sleepless nights. Media coverage grew kinder, but the price of being a symbol was steep. I could not walk into a boardroom without the old guard bracing for confrontation. My presence became a warning, a reminder that secrets no longer stayed hidden. At tech conferences, other founders approached me not with gossip or partnership offers, but with stories of losses, betrayals, and, sometimes, unlikely triumphs. I listened, I advised, and more than once, I quietly connected survivors with our foundation's resources. Meanwhile, Matt's name was scrubbed from company records and news stories, reduced to a footnote in business textbooks. Izzy, after serving her reduced sentence, vanished from the public eye. I learned from a mutual acquaintance that she had started over in a small town, teaching financial literacy to women escaping abusive relationships. It was not forgiveness I felt, but a hard-won acceptance that everyone builds their own reckoning. The company's reputation as a clean house began attracting partners I never imagined: regulatory agencies, international watchdogs, advocacy groups. Raj spearheaded a landmark agreement with the European Union, making OrmPay the first U.S. fintech subject to open audits by global regulators. Our user numbers rebounded, investors returned, this time, cautiously, demanding the same transparency we had demanded of ourselves. Each quarter, Jesse and I released reports more detailed than required by law. When mistakes happened, and they did, we owned them publicly, fixed them, and moved forward. At our annual summit, now a fixture in the industry, I took the stage for the keynote. Our story is not about triumph over adversity, I told the crowd. It is about what you build after you lose everything you thought mattered. It's about making every failure a lesson, every scar a shield. The applause was different now, not polite or obligatory, but full-throated and fierce, the sound of people who had lived through storms of their own. Late one evening, as the city lights flickered against the bay, I sat in my office and reflected on the relentlessness of my own rise. I had not sought power for its own sake, nor revenge for its own satisfaction. My victory was survival, and the unwavering choice to make each new day an act of resistance against silence and compromise. I thought of those who still walked in fear, and I promised myself to keep fighting for them, no matter how long it took. To all who have stayed with this story, remember to subscribe. The rise is not over. In the final chapters, the legacy we fought for will be tested in ways no one expects, and the true meaning of justice will be revealed. The first sign was almost invisible, a subtle change in the tone of a media inquiry, a cryptic message forwarded to my private email. For months, I had felt the company turning a corner, rebuilding trust and gaining momentum, but the past has a way of echoing through even the strongest walls. That winter, rumors began to swirl about a series of breaches at other major fintech companies. Fraudulent accounts, data leaks, suspicious wire transfers. At first, it seemed like a distant storm. But then, the same anonymous tipster who had once helped Victor expose Matt's offshore shell games surfaced again. Late one evening, Jessie rushed into my office, her face ashen. "You need to see this." She dropped a folder on my desk, full of redacted reports, whistleblower statements, and a list of names, some unfamiliar, some all too recognizable. At the top was a single phrase: "They learned from your playbook." As I scanned the evidence, the implications became clear. Our success, our commitment to transparency, had inspired not just imitators but a network of opportunists who were gaming the very systems we had created to catch them. The industry's shadow side was evolving, using my own strategies as a guide. Raj called an emergency board meeting. "If we don't act now, the reforms we built will collapse under their own weight," he warned. I nodded, feeling the burden settle in my bones. This was no longer about a single company or my own redemption. The work we had started had become a blueprint for justice and for new forms of deception. In the days that followed, we launched a task force, collaborating with regulators, law enforcement, and rival companies who, until now, had kept their distance. Jessie coordinated encrypted briefings. Victor's security teams mapped digital footprints across continents. The pressure was relentless. For every network we shut down, 2 more seemed to spring up. My old adversaries, bankers, lawyers, even former investors who had once turned their backs, now came to us for help. Their desperation was a measure of how deep the rot had grown. Outside, protesters returned, demanding even stricter controls. Inside, employees debated the limits of surveillance and privacy. Could we stop new frauds without becoming the very kind of unchecked power we once fought against? Each decision was a test of the principles I had sworn to uphold. I realized with growing clarity that leadership was not about vanquishing enemies but navigating endless gray areas, each choice a balance between vigilance and overreach. One night, after a string of all-hands crisis calls, I found myself alone in the boardroom, staring at the city. The temptation to walk away, to let someone else bear the weight, pressed on me. But the world was watching, and I knew too well what happened when those with power looked away. I recorded a video statement for the company and the foundation. No system is unbreakable. Our strength is not in claiming perfection, but in never stopping the fight for better. Every time the shadows return, we face them together, and we do not blink. That video spread far beyond our own walls. Universities used it in ethics classes. Companies around the world adopted our open audit protocols. Still, new scandals broke in the news almost every week, some with ties to people I had once trusted. Jessie was the first to say it out loud. You know what this means, right? You've become the new standard, and the new target. I nodded, feeling both pride and the cold reality of it. A letter arrived in my inbox, and signed, "As long as you fight, so will we." But remember, not everyone wants to be saved. I saved it, a reminder that not all wars are won by truth alone. Some simply go on, relentless as the tide. The legacy of Orompe and the foundation now balanced on a knife's edge. Our next moves would not just shape my future, but the future of everyone who believed that justice was worth the cost. The shadows had returned, and this time, they were smarter. Do not look away, subscribe and stay with us. The final storm is about to break, and nothing will be left unchanged. The city felt charged with an electricity I could not shake, as if every street and skyscraper knew what was coming. Word spread quickly that a global syndicate, built on the bones of old fraud rings, was targeting not just Orompe but the entire system we helped create. Their operations were coordinated, faceless, weaponizing both technology and public doubt. Cyber attacks hammered our networks. Social media teemed with disinformation, painting me as a manipulator, accusing the foundation of cover-ups. For the first time since the original scandal, I saw real fear in Jessie's eyes. Our boardroom became a war room. Victor slept on a cot in the server closet, his team working in shifts to monitor threats. Raj led crisis talks with regulators from 3 continents. Jessie built an internal rapid response unit, part ethics, part PR, part digital forensics. I spent sleepless nights drafting responses to partners and the public, careful never to promise perfection, only action and resolve. The attacks were relentless. Anonymous emails threatened employees and their families. Regulators received doctored evidence suggesting our audits were fraudulent. Banks hesitated to process our transactions. Jessie and I watched the company's cash reserves dwindle as we doubled spending on security, legal counsel, and staff care. Old enemies, sensing weakness, re-emerged, bloggers, former partners, rival CEOs, each eager to see the crusader fall. Every hour brought a new crisis. At times, I wondered if we had reached the breaking point. Yet, in those darkest hours, I witnessed a different kind of power. Employees volunteered for longer shifts, turning the office into a 24/7 command center. The foundation's hotline was overwhelmed by industry insiders ready to testify against the syndicate. Anonymous donors sent resources. Even former critics, some of whom had once doubted or attacked me, offered help. "You were right," read one note left on my desk. "We can't let them win." When an especially vicious data breach leaked employee information, I stood before the entire company. My voice shook with exhaustion, but I spoke plainly. We do not control the storms, only how we stand in them. If anyone wants to walk away, no one will judge you. But if you stay, know this, we face this together. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Silence hung in the air, then one by one, they stood and pledged to stay. We doubled our efforts. Victor's team traced the attacks to a network stretching from Singapore to Zurich. Raj organized a secret summit with global regulators. No press, no leaks. Jesse led a campaign of radical transparency, releasing our audit logs in real time, even as our lawyers protested. The public, seeing our struggles laid bare, rallied behind us. Donations flooded the foundation. Employees from other tech firms volunteered expertise. After weeks of siege, cracks appeared in the syndicate. Key members were arrested overseas. The media, once hungry for my downfall, shifted focus to the conspiracy unraveling across continents. We handed over every scrap of evidence to law enforcement, making sure nothing could be buried or spun. Jesse wept when the news broke that our efforts had protected not just our own people, but thousands at risk across the industry. I returned to my office and found a single rose on my desk, no card. A reminder that every victory carries a cost, every legacy is paid for in full. I sat alone and allowed myself a moment to breathe, to feel the scars and the pride. The final storm had not destroyed us, it had revealed us. If you believe in standing through the storm, subscribe now. In the last chapter, everything we've fought for will be tested one final time, and the true meaning of justice, survival, and legacy will be revealed. Spring returned to San Francisco, the city washed clean after months of darkness. The headlines had shifted from crisis to celebration, international arrests, new laws inspired by our transparency protocols, and record-breaking public support for the Aurum Foundation. But beneath the surface, I knew the journey was not about fame or even victory. It was about what remained when the dust settled, when the final storm had passed. I walked through the Aurum Pay headquarters, now busier and brighter than ever. Employees greeted each other with a sense of camaraderie forged by survival. Jessie's laughter echoed from the common area, where her team helped new recruits navigate the intricacies of ethics, security, and trust. Victor, after weeks of living in the office, finally took a long overdue vacation. Raj and I met in a sunlit conference room, reviewing partnership offers from across the globe, every proposal shaped by the standards we'd once fought to defend. The world was watching. Governments sought our advice on building more resilient systems. Companies large and small requested foundation audits, hoping to emulate our recovery. At the city's university, I guest lectured on the anatomy of scandal and the architecture of reform. Students crowded the lecture halls, not to hear about pain, but to learn how resilience is made, not born. In quiet moments, I reflected on what I had lost and gained. The pain of betrayal had not vanished, nor had the knowledge that trust is always fragile. Yet in its place, something stronger had taken root, a legacy built not on perfection, but on accountability, courage, and transparency. Matt and Izzy, whose shadows once haunted every room, were now stories told for the lessons they carried. The city no longer whispered my name with suspicion, but with a measured respect. I understood now. The true reward for surviving the storm is not the applause that follows, but the chance to make sure no one else walks through darkness alone. At the Foundation's anniversary gala, Jessie stood at my side as we addressed the crowd. Survivors, whistleblowers, regulators, and former critics mingled as equals. The room glowed with hope, with the knowledge that the world had changed, just a little, because we had refused to look away. As I spoke, I locked eyes with new leaders in the room, knowing my work was not to rule, but to guide, to empower the next generation to carry the torch forward. That night, alone on my balcony overlooking the city, I reread a message I'd saved from the darkest days. As long as you fight, so will we. I finally understood its meaning. The true legacy is not justice for its own sake, but the community, vigilance, and hope that justice inspires. We had survived the storm, yes, but more than that, We had taught others how to stand together, how to rebuild, how to turn pain into purpose. If this story moved you, if you believe in the power of truth, resilience, and a new kind of leadership, subscribe and join us. The story is never truly over. For every storm that passes, there are countless new beginnings waiting on the horizon. And somewhere, another survivor will find the strength to rise. Thank you for being part of this journey. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never stop building what comes after the storm.